Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Smart Cities Chronicles, your podcast for everything smart cities action, investment, and outcomes. My name is Adam Beck. I'm host of the Chronicles, and my day job is Executive Director of the Smart Cities Council for Australia and New Zealand. This is also doubling up as episode 7 of our digital twins sessions, which we use to have a conversation with digital twin leaders, both nationally and internationally. And joining me today from the UK is Sarah Hayes, who is an independent consultant, but ex-government, ex-private sector. And she's joining me today to chat about all things sort of the value of data and digital twins and the like. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Sarah, our listeners are scattered all over the world. Can I get you to tell us where you're from geographically, and also a bit about who you are and what you do as a day job?
Sure. So I'm from the UK. I live in Cornwall by the sea. And my background is in telecoms and regulation, but more recently I was working at the National Infrastructure Commission in the UK, and that's where I led the team that produced the report Data for the Public Good, which I think we'll be talking about in a little while.
Indeed.
And then since then, this year, I now work as an independent consultant, and I'm actually working with the Centre for Digital Built Britain, and I'm leading the change stream of the National Digital Twin Programme, which is all about getting people involved in the National Digital Twin and making it work for them.
Okay, so you kind of left the government, you're kind of back a little bit, but also with a little bit of freedom maybe. What's it like being sort of formally outside of government?
I've worked in the private sector, I've worked for a regulator, and I've worked in government. I have to say, when I was working at the National Infrastructure Commission, it was the most sort of neutral position I felt I was ever in, really, when I was working for an organisation. And it's fairly similar now at the Centre for Digital Built Britain, is you're really looking at it from all angles, not just from one perspective.
Yeah, sure. Just for our listeners that may not be familiar with the Centre for Digital Built Britain, Sarah, what kind of is it? And it's a bit of a partnership model, isn't it? Can you describe it briefly?
So yes, it's supported by BEIS, by government, by the government department, and it's really set up to help digitise the built environment.
And for our listeners, if you are in front of a browser, you can head to cdbb.cam.ac.uk. That'll get you to the Centre for Digital Built Britain. So let's rewind a little bit, Sarah, and indeed my connecting with you came sort of via my interest in that report that you mentioned that you were involved with while at the National Infrastructure Commission, which is data for the public good. I love this document. I reference it almost daily over here in Australia. The idea of a national government in some way looking into researching and then valuing the role of data in the built environment, and therefore setting an agenda for policy and transformation and other things. Can you kind of give us the beginning through to the end of that report succinctly, how it came about, how you approached it, and is it what I read? You know, it sort of sets the table for sort of what's playing out as sort of an agenda for digital transformation in the built environment. Let's see how you go with kind of that task or that question of summarising it into a neat sort of thought piece.
Sure. Well, it really starts back in 2016, actually, when in the budget, the then Chancellor set the question for the National Infrastructure Commission: how can new technologies improve the productivity of infrastructure? So I started work on the project in 2017, and the first job really was to look at new technologies. So I Googled new technologies, and the research on top trends for 2017, and in the list, incidentally, was digital twins. But it was really about, you know, the first step was, what are all the new technologies out there? Goodness me, we could boil the ocean with this report. There was so much that we could potentially cover with respect to infrastructure. You know, blockchain was being talked about. Big data, backscattering, all sorts of exciting new technologies were being talked about, but it was like, what can we actually focus on? So we engaged the likes of Tech UK, we talked to them, we talked to their members, we talked to different stakeholders who were already very active in this area. Centre for Smart Infrastructure and Construction in Cambridge, and we came to the sort of the fairly early conclusion that we needed to focus on big data. Because in the infrastructure sector, this was starting to become a big thing. It already was a big thing, but it was an issue of how to organize and use that data, how to manage data. The companies, the utilities in the infrastructure sector were already starting to realize that they need to embark upon their own digital transformation strategies. And they were all at different stages. So some were fairly advanced in terms of digital transformation, and others had further to go. But it was a case of, you know, how do we start to organize this data in a way that's useful for the companies? And I think that was really sort of the starting point. And we started to look at case studies in the use of data. So what we found is that companies on their digital transformation journey, that they were at different stages, they were starting to manage it, but they weren't, there were difficulties really were in sharing that data with other organizations within their own sector and across sectors. So for example, in the water sector, we would hold discussions whereby the water sector would come to us and tell us about the sort of exciting work that they were doing internally with new technologies and the data that they were using to sort of to measure improvements in performance. And another water company would say, oh, hang on a minute, this is really interesting for us as well. You know, we can tell you about what we're doing, but actually we've approached it from a slightly different angle. And another water company was saying, well, actually, we're thinking about developing, you know, a model of our entire network, which sounds a bit like a digital twin, but we're really not sure about the best way to go about doing that. It would be helpful to learn from others of the best approach. So it was really, you know, we talked across sectors. So we talked to the telecom sector, to the energy companies, transport, and the water companies. And the message that was coming back was that companies sort of need to organize their own data internally, and they were starting to see the benefits of sharing data within organizations. But then they were recognizing, actually, it can be quite useful if I can share data with another organization, you know, with another company in my sector, and sometimes, you know, working across sectors. So, for example, if you're going to build a new train line that goes underground, you need to know where everyone else's assets are.
Yeah.
And to a you know, an exact level of precision. So we recognized that it weren't just benefits from sharing data within an organization or within a sector, it was across sectors. And it was, how do you actually enable the sharing of data? So, you know, back to sort of the train underground, it was very much about what are the risks of a strike, of hitting someone else's network? What are the potential costs of doing that? And actually having that information, which hasn't been pulled together so far, is sort of pulling it all into one place, or one accessible place, so that people can get the information that they need to then make the decisions that they need to. And I think it was sort of that we came to sort of quite a few good examples. So the Environment Agency in terms of flood alerts, the transport sector in particular, in terms of, you know, Transport for London, amassing information from different parts of the network to inform people about, you know, what's the best route to take for, you know, to get from A to B. Should I take the train? Should I take the bus, or drive, or cycle, or whatever it is? It was, people were starting to recognise the benefits of sharing across sectors. And I think, you know, that's the key message of the report, really, is there are benefits from sharing data across sectors, and many of those benefits are public.
And yeah, and is that, Sarah, where the digital twin enters the scene as a platform, a framework, a vehicle by which we can share data? Not only share data, of course, but visualize data and integrate data. But was that the sort of the justification or rationale for introducing digital twin as sort of a platform and opportunity?
Yes, exactly. So a digital twin being a way of organizing that information. So if a digital twin is a digital representation of something physical, so you could have a digital twin of your office or the city that you live in, sort of bringing information together about that city, you can start to see how the systems within that city fit together. So, for example, if you're looking at the traffic flows within a city, and if you're starting to say, okay, well, as a result of COVID, people are more concerned about air quality now, and so we need to manage the levels of pollution within a city, then you can use a digital twin if you have all that information pulled together in one place to be able to manage traffic flows, redirect them, plan different routes to reduce levels of air pollution. So yes, it was very much about this is a way of bringing the information together, organizing it, and then being able to share it with other organizations. And so it's not only, I think, about being able to sort of company to company, but then it's taking that sort of the bird's eye view. So it's the sort of the city view or the national view.
Just
And I think
on.
it's
Oh, yeah, sorry. Go on.
But it's important to note that when we talk about the sort of the vision for the national digital twin, it's really that. It's that bird's eye view of seeing how the whole system fits together. It's not one great big computer model of the UK. It's lots of digital twins. It's what we call an ecosystem of digital twins.
Yeah, and that was exactly the question I was going to ask, because there are some folks that kind of hear that, the UK want to build a national digital twin. It's like, oh my God, talking about boiling the ocean. But but what you're saying there is that the idea is not one big massive digital twin, but sort of slowly building up component parts to give you then, of course, the 40,000 feet overview of kind of everything, I suppose.
Yes, so it's important to look at it from the micro perspective and the macro perspective. So at the micro level, as I said, you can have the digital twin at sort of the very smallest level that you need it to be of an object,
Mm.
of a building, of a house, of a city, of a town, of electricity company, of any part of the network of an asset. Then you can connect all that up with the cities, with the regions to take the national view. So whilst you can make decisions about, say, a digital twin of an engine or a digital twin of a wind turbine, you can also start to look at how it all connects at the national level. So, for example, if you start to fit these models together, and you connect them so you can share data across the sectors, then you can start to look at sort of national decisions. And I think that's where we see the sort of the value of a national digital twin, is understanding if you're going to build a great big train line up the middle of the country,
Mm-hmm.
what are the possible consequences? If you change it in different ways, what are all the different scenarios that you can consider? What will be the impact on the local population, on jobs, on traffic flows, on energy use? What are all the sort of the unexpected repercussions? And I think that's what's particularly interesting about digital twins and the vision for the national digital twin, is that it starts to sort of to investigate what are the potential repercussions of doing things, what are the consequences of interventions that we might not expect. And I think when we start to think about big projects within infrastructure, it's quite difficult as infrastructure planners to think through all those consequences. But if you're able to manage big data in a way that you've got all the information about everything as much as possible, then you can organize it in a way which helps sort of better inform what those scenarios are. So when you make a decision, you have a better understanding of what the possible consequences are. And it's not, the idea that we'd use this national digital twin model to make the decisions for us. It's all about getting more information to the decision makers so that they can make a better informed decision with a better informed understanding of what the consequences are. And I think an area that perhaps digital twins haven't reached yet is the investor community, because it's really going to help with investment decisions, because especially now in the sort of the COVID to post-COVID world, money is tight. Therefore, the sort of the decision-making process is going to be more fraught. And that there needs to be greater justification for certain investments. And I think that digital twin models will be able to help with that.
Yeah, I would imagine that there is no more important time for, surgical like insights and investment to sort of be a priority. Sarah, you mentioned the word decision makers about 30 seconds ago, and just on decision makers and the report, what can you tell us about the process of kind of getting this endorsed? Getting government endorsement approval, getting the outcomes and ideas within this report that, data is valuable. I mean, there's a section in there that says data as infrastructure. There's some pretty, at times, wild ideas in there. What was it like getting anointed? Getting this anointed as, we're in. We buy into this. You've sold us. Let's do it. What was that like?
Well, because it was interesting because we were working cross-sector. So it wasn't just one department, we were talking to multiple departments, but it was about bringing it to life and showing what the real benefits would be. So if you've got better information management within the Department of Transport, the benefits that can bring, the reduction in costs and the sort of the effect on the environment, start to tie that in with the energy sector. It was really sort of a process of talking through what the potential benefits are. Helping people understand that there is a way to manage data, that there are approaches to doing this, but it can be quite overwhelming, everything that needs to be dealt with. And I think really it was about the enthusiasm from the private sector. We carried out a lot of engagement. We talked to a lot of the different infrastructure companies, and they were crying out for a framework to manage and share data. They were saying, we can't do this on our own. If we develop our own approach to developing a digital twin, how do we know that's the best approach? What about, is that then going to be useful for when we know we want to share information with another organization? If we do this separately, then then how are we going to realize the benefits that we see that are possible from this? So there was very, very strong support from the private sector, and it was really about explaining that within government, that government needed to act to connect all this together and provide the framework that was necessary. And explaining things like what is a digital twin. I find that still in the seminars, the discussions, there's still a lot of discussion about what is a digital twin, and that's right, because I think we need to come to sort of some consensus about what digital twins are, what they can do for us, because they do mean different things to different people. But it was sort of explaining technically what that might mean, and then in terms of what the benefits would be for the government departments, but obviously for citizens as a whole, and how this could improve quality of life. So it definitely was a sort of a process of sort of walking people through it. And then when we published the report, we made 3 key recommendations, which were set up a digital framework task group for people to do this. And it was very clear already, who was interested to sort of get this up and running. To set an information management framework, so to set the languages for sharing information about infrastructure in the built environment, and to work on developing the national digital twin, so to enable the national digital twin. Those were the 3 clear recommendations from the report. And they were then supported by government, and that's when the Centre for Digital Built Britain was tasked to take those forward. So,
Um,
it's been great to have that support.
yeah, absolutely. Um, the narrative is really interesting that I'm observing over there. I've just got something up on my screen now. This relates to sort of earlier this year, late last year, earlier this year. There was a quote in a article around the Heathrow expansion, and sort of it says here the heading was, Heathrow may pay suppliers for data rather than assets. It really feels like this idea of data as infrastructure is really starting to sort of move as a narrative and idea. But I'd understand, and of course this is, I imagine, part of your work at CDBB, which we'll sort of talk about now. But that's you know I, having worked around property and construction and development, it takes some time for mindsets to change and for sort of change to happen at any swift speed. This is kind of bold thinking, right?
I guess so, but it really, I mean, often it takes disasters to happen to change mindsets.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is the classic. We look at a bridge, we say that data is as important as the bricks and mortar that form that bridge. And if that bridge were to fall down, you really need to know. You would have known in advance what the state of that bridge is, what condition was it in, when did it need to be maintained, repaired. And actually having that information about the bridge so that it doesn't fall down is, it's absolutely essential. So it is part of infrastructure. It's part of the life cycle of infrastructure and keeping infrastructure going as long as possible. In the UK, we have a fairly well-developed infrastructure system. It's fairly old. So the point is, how can we get as much out of this infrastructure as possible and prolong its life? To do that, we need to know what state it's in. And when it needs to be maintained, what are sort of the lowest cost additions to it to prolong its life? What are the sort of, what else do we need to build? But it is, it goes back to the original question of how do we improve the productivity of infrastructure? How do we get the most out of it? We do that by understanding what state it's in.
And from a digital twin perspective, Sarah, I often find that people think that it's all about a digital model. We're going to build something. Let's build a digital model and let's build a digital twin, of the thing that we're going to build. Yet, just the operational maintenance aspects of infrastructure and having a digital twin from that perspective is, as important, if not more important, given the cost and the savings and opportunities for greater efficiencies, in over the life cycle of the asset, which is far more from a time perspective, very much larger than just the planning and design and construction phase.
Yes, it is. I mean, I think if you look at the examples so far, there's already some evidence to show that there are productivity improvements and cost savings, reductions in carbon from using digital twins. So there are many aspects, I think, that actually that investment can then deliver. So the initial investment in creating a digital twin of a physical asset is fairly small relative to the actual benefits and cost savings that will occur over the life cycle.
And as part of the program there's a bunch of lighthouse projects, aren't there, that are really being used to help advance, digital twin learnings, standard development as well with BSI. Tell us a little bit more now about the work that you're doing at CDBB and how that's sort of helping sort of build greater capacity and, advancing, this idea that was sort of originally outlined in the paper.
Okay, so I guess there are three elements to the program. The first is around the information management framework and building the framework for sharing data. And I think the way that I like to think about that is Mark Enzer, who is the chair of the National Digital Twin Programme, we often talk about the tent,
Yeah.
and see this framework as a tent. And if, you know, in order to share data with other organisations, you need to be inside the same tent. So that you're speaking the same language, you can share the information that you need to with the right levels of security, of course. You know, that's always important to note. But you know, if everyone recognises the value of organising and managing their own data and then sharing it with other organisations, then there's no point everyone going off and building their own tents. You know, come inside the great big tent that you know, that's of benefit to everyone, because what we're doing at the moment is we have a set of experts who are developing what we call the foundation data model. So that's the sort of the structure of the tent, as it were. It's sort of, it's you know, the point is we've got the sort of this set of experts who are working on making this tent very strong, stable structure that's, you know, that's going to work for across sectors, you know, across the whole of the country for a long time. So we sort of see that there's no point going off building your own tent on the side of the hill. The rain might come and, you know, and blow it away. It's like, come inside the big tent, which has been specially designed for the built environment, so that people can share data. So that's really sort of the first element. Someone else will give you a far more technical explanation of the information. But I guess that's my version of it. But we also have the Digital Twin Hub, which is, it's a website, it's a forum. So it's a way for digital twin owners and developers and those who are interested in digital twins to come together. So that the slogan for the Digital Twin Hub is learn by doing, progress by sharing. And that's what it is. It's about getting the people who are developing those digital twins to sort of connect them with the supplier community. And the sort of the people who are already doing a lot of thinking and research in this area, and sort of helping them develop the best version of the digital twin. You know, I like to say digital twins cannot be developed in isolation. You need to self-isolation. You need to collaborate to actually produce digital twins. So the point of the Digital Twin Hub really is to connect those people who are developing the digital twins and to spark some conversation. And what I found already is that when I've attended some of the discussions and the webinars, I found out about people who I didn't realize who were active in this area and have a different perspective. And I think that's what's really important is in having that diversity of view. One of the challenges that, you know, we've encountered throughout this is sort of, you know, the dichotomy between competition and collaboration. Because, you know, I really strongly see that you need collaboration to produce, to work towards the national digital twin of the UK, but you know, towards that vision. But you need you need sort of different perspectives, different skill sets in developing those digital twins. But at the same time, you need a little element of competition as well to sort of push us all along.
Yeah.
You know, it's a balance, but I really, you know, I think the strongest influence really needs to be collaboration, because you can't just build it with one particular mindset. You have to come at it from the legal, the security point of view, the operational, the sort of the macro and the micro. So it's about it is about bringing all those different perspectives together. That's the second element. And then the third element is the change stream that I'm leading, which really is about getting people involved in this.
That's hard. That sounds hard.
Yes, it really is. Telling them about this tent. It's telling them about, you know, the Digital Twin Hub and what might be helpful for them in the Digital Twin Hub. And it, you know, and it's encouraging people, come and see this tent. You know, actually, what's the point in you spending money in building your own tent on the side of the hill by yourself, when actually this tent has already been built, it's paid for, come, it's free, come and join it, and you're going to benefit from this because you're actually going to learn from what other organizations are doing. And that's what we're really doing in the program, is enabling. You know, it really is about bringing the different actors together to for the work to happen. A lot of it is really about coordination.
Could you imagine, Sarah, advancing a digital twin agenda in the UK if this national program or national support and coordination wasn't there?
I mean, that's interesting because it's, would the private sector deliver this on their own?
Mm,
I think it would take longer.
mm,
I think so the way, because you need agreement about how, you need some sort of framework to share data. You need a common language to share data, and you need the skills, the ability to use these digital twins. If you're developing digital twins for local councils to use to help them plan different traffic routes or where to put in new housing developments, it's no good just bringing in the consultants to do this for them. You need people within the council to the local authority to be able to use the models, so that the decision maker can call upon their team and say, go and get me the information. What are the possible consequences going to be if we put it, on the outside by the river, or whatever the question would be. They need to be able to access that information. So you do need government support, I think, to sort of invest in the skills, so that everyone can use these models and understand what the benefit, what they can be used for and how they can be used, but also to create that overall framework, I think. And so it is about creating standards for sharing data. And I guess I liken it, I have a background in telecoms, in mobile telecoms in particular, and I kind of liken it to the development of GSM technology. So if you go back to the 90s, you had CDMA over in the States, which was a proprietary technology, and you have the development of GSM in Europe. And that was really driven by political will and support. There was strong will. There was recognition that if you wanted to be able to use mobile phones across countries and to interconnect easily, etc., then you needed to have some kind of common standard across countries. And so I think the element of political will and government support there was crucial. And ultimately, I think what's interesting is that, at one point in the 90s, CDMA was supposed to be technically superior to GSM, but then, the support that GSM had, it became technically superior to CDMA and more widespread. And that's really what this is all about, is scale. As I said, there's no point having your tent on the side of the hillside.
Yeah.
If everyone else is in this great big tent over there, which is connected by video to the other tent in another country. And I think, that originally the vision was very much about a national vision, but I think we're increasingly recognizing the importance of being able to connect twins across borders, because companies are global, aren't they? And they don't want to have just national digital twins. They want to be able to see, if you're a mobile operator in Europe, you want to be able to see how your operations are sort of optimized across borders. So we sort of see that the development of standards actually needs to be done sort of from a national perspective, but then with international agreement. And that really requires government support. How would you actually coordinate that if it was just driven by the private sector? Normally we think of the private sector as getting to solutions quicker than government, but I actually think in this situation, it would be sort of, if it's government driven, we're likely to get to the sort of towards that vision sooner than we would if it was just private sector driven.
Great response. I love that. I'm gonna use that more and more. Sarah, last question we've got time for, more of a personal one. What are you looking forward to over the next 6 to 12 months?
I think one of the things I'm looking forward to is bringing this to life a bit more, because it's often talked about in a fairly theoretical and visionary sort of way. This is what we want to achieve. This is what we could do. So what I would like to see is some of the city digital twins starting to work in a way that people can see, oh yes, we can use this to, we're the issue about the return to work, it's obviously a challenge in terms of limited numbers of people on public transport and in office space. I would like to see some movements towards using digital twins to help with that planning process in terms of, and shops obviously have a big issue at the moment about how do we monitor the level of people who are coming in and out of our building so we can make it a safe place. So I don't think this needs to be the all singing dancing version of digital twin models, but I think we can start to use some of the elements around what digital twins can do to start to sort of build it together so we can monitor where people are, taking into account the privacy concerns and security issues, but sort of you can anonymize this data so that you can see how a building is being used, and how could you change the direction of people, I guess, coming in and out of the building, so you can sort of improve the flows and the safety. So I would like to start to see some of these digital twins being brought to life from, say, an individual building perspective, but also from a city perspective. I think there are lots, one of the things we've found is there are lots of initiatives. There's lots going on, and that's what we've tried to do with the Digital Twin Hub, is to bring those initiatives together to start to share the learnings. So I would really like to see those initiatives starting to be joined up and connected. And I think some of these city initiatives do need more funding to keep them going, because essentially they're pilots for sort of something that could be expanded. So I think starting to sort of see some tangible benefits so people can see, it's for the penny to drop, say, oh yes, okay, this is gonna enable us to keep our public transport running, because we can guarantee that sort of, a certain amount of social distancing is achieved, and number of people coming onto the buses, but at the same time we understand what the risk level is for the spread of COVID. So it's, actually seeing these models being used in a fairly simple but useful way, I think is, what I would really like to see, because I think that will help people understand what this is all about, and why the initial sort of time is involved, and investment to set all this up is required, and why it makes sense to all be inside the same tent rather than separate tents.
Well, here, I totally agree with that. Lighting up our digital twins is sort of what I've been trying to sort of push as a bit of a narrative just over the last couple of weeks, particularly as economic stimulus is flowing in, nations like ours in Australia, but also over in New Zealand as well, and sort of making sure that we kind of look to invest while there is infrastructure-related stimulus, flowing, that we do consider putting it into things that can not only stimulate the economy, create jobs now, but also lay some foundations for some future prosperity. So totally buying into your enthusiasm there. Thank you. Thank you for that. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Yes, indeed. Thanks very much, Adam. Really enjoyed it.
Pleasure. And for our guest, that was Sarah Hayes. She's recently out of the National Infrastructure Commission in the UK, but now working within the Centre for Digital Built Britain around all things data sharing, digital twins, and as you've just heard from her, the real easy task of helping sort of mobilise and activate change around this agenda, which is a really significant one, and an important one that, of course, the Smart Cities Council supports both here in the region of Australia, New Zealand, but globally. And for our listeners on our podcast, The Smart Cities Chronicles, if you're not subscribing, you can do so by heading to your favourite place where you get your podcasts. You can also head to our website, smartcitieschronicles.com. For those that are watching this video through our YouTube channel, there was reference to the Digital Twin Hub in the UK through the Centre for Digital Built Britain. We also have one down here in the region for those in Australia and New Zealand or beyond that want to check out what's happening, all things digital twin in this region. You can head to digitaltwinhub.org. My name is Adam Beck, the host of The Chronicles. It's been great bringing you this edition of The Chronicles and the Digital Twin sessions. We look forward to catching up with you again soon.